Imagine waking up in a bustling Ugandan town today. The first sounds you hear are likely the ringing of church bells echoing down the street, mixing with the Islamic call to prayer. Yet, if you stood in that exact same spot 200 years ago, neither of those sounds would exist. Back in the 1840s, East African spirituality was tied directly to the land. If you wanted to pray, you might visit a sacred rock formation, or gather under the sprawling branches of an ancient matuba tree. People held a deep belief in a single supreme creator, but they didn't gather inside large buildings to worship. Instead, they asked the spirits of their ancestors to carry their prayers up to the divine. And there were no written scriptures to read or recite. All of this history, belief, and law was passed down entirely through spoken words and local memory. The spiritual world of early Uganda was deeply rooted in the physical environment around them, completely separated from the holy texts and global religions developing in the rest of the world. That deep isolation ended around 1844, when Arab and Swahili traders sailed their gooden ships across the vast waters of Lake Victoria. These men were driven by commerce. They came to the region specifically to capture slaves and harvest ivory to sell back on the coast. But while they taught the Arabic language and taught locals the halal rules for preparing and slaughtering meat, the local ruler at the time, King Mutesa I, saw a unique opportunity. He realized that aligning with the outside world could bring new knowledge and power to his kingdom. He dictated a letter asking for teachers to come to his land and sent it back out through a traveling British explorer named H.M. Stanley. The message reached Europe, and the response was incredibly fast. Protestant missionaries arrived in 1877, and Catholic priests, known as the White Fathers, arrived closely behind them in 1879. In less than 40 years, a society built on oral traditions and nature shrines found itself hosting the pioneers of two highly organized global faiths. These European missionaries changed how Ugandans worked and lived. They introduced new crops to the soil, teaching local farmers how to grow and process harvested cotton to generate entirely new streams of income. They set up outdoor clinics and built the region's first modern hospitals to treat devastating local diseases like sleeping sickness that plagued the area. They built formal classrooms to teach reading and writing. They even hauled in heavy mechanical presses, stamping ink onto paper to translate the Bible into local languages like Luganda. But when King Mutesa died, his son, King Mwanga II, took the throne, and he quickly realized these new institutions were eroding his absolute power. The young men working inside the king's own palace started to disobey his direct orders. If his commands contradicted their new religious beliefs, they refused to follow them, viewing their God as the highest authority. By embracing these foreign schools, hospitals, and texts, the kingdom now faced a direct struggle for power between the king and his own subjects. Between 1885 and 1887, the king's frustration reached a breaking point. He decided to crush this rebellion of faith with absolute force. He issued a terrifying ultimatum to the young converts in his court. They must completely abandon their new religions, or they would be marched to a place called Namugongo and executed. The young men refused to yield. They chose to face the executioner and were thrown into the fires, burning alive for what they believed in. And while the Catholic and Anglican martyrs are remembered around the world today, dozens of local Muslims had actually been executed years earlier for making that exact same choice, refusing to compromise their faith for the king. Today, that execution site holds a landmark shrine, constructed with metallic beams to look like a traditional hut. It draws millions on global pilgrimages yearly. The men who died at Namugongo proved that these imported religions had taken deep root. Ugandans now valued these new beliefs more than their own lives. How do we weigh the historical ledger of these rapid changes? On the side of progress, formal education, modern medicine, and the end of the slave trade. On the side of pain, deadly religious wars, divided communities, and the loss of African traditions. It is a deeply complicated history. But every time a modern Ugandan locks through the doors of a place like Mango Hospital, they are experiencing the direct, living result of that fiery collision from the 19th century.